We do appreciate being able to be here. We have the option of training the trainers, or we could train all of you, and I think this works well because first of all we get to meet and greet, see the faces. You know, that's one thing we don't get to do anymore, is that Patty probably sees more people than myself, and I do appreciate being able to see your faces. Sorry if I don't always know all of your names. And I just want to point out that the reason we're here is because within our facility, we do rely on the nursing staff to do admissions. And the whole idea is that we don't have 24/7 admission staff. So, and it has been decided that it's much more cost effective to have clinical staff here 24/7, and they would also do admissions, than to have the admission staff here the 24/7. So we do greatly appreciate your assistance in this. Accuracy and completeness, you know, is the bottom line of it all. We need to gather the demographic and insurance information. So from that standpoint, life is not any different. Whether we're in Healthland or whether we're in Meditech, it's still the same information, and we do rely greatly on that. We understand that you don't always have the opportunity to get everything up front. You're taking care of the patient, and so you're doing the best you can at that time. The admission staff will follow up. We want you to continue to do what you've been doing now to communicate directly with the admission staff, whether it be by notes, whether it be by leaving. We've always said leave your messages at extension 695. Those are the kind of things that's not going to change. We still need you to do that. We still need you to take copies of front and back of the admissions, or the insurance cards, and unless eventually we have a scanner again in ER like we used to have. If that happens, certainly there will be training, so don't worry about that. At this point in time, I'm not aware that they've ordered a scanner for back there. The one thing that is going to be a little different and is very noticeable is in the Meditech system, we don't have near as many patient types. Now, we've had a long list, and you've probably, most everybody's seen the sheet that it's yellow, orange, green within our Healthland system. That's not the way the Meditech system is going to be. When Patty goes through this, you'll see, what is it, approximately 8 different admissions. You won't necessarily even be using all of those. They're standard content through Meditech, and so one thing that I said, surgical daycare, that sounds just a little bit different to me. However, that's a terminology that we'll probably start using because that's what's in the system. So she'll point out the different patient types, but as far as that goes, we'll just go ahead. Patty's going to start, I believe, with the inpatient admission. That's actually an example of what you have right now in your screen prints. We've done admitting screen prints, discharge screen prints, and you can follow along there. This is not a class. It's an introduction to the admission, so we're not going to require you to actually be on your computers right now. You can just follow the screen, follow your handouts, and write notes, and please ask questions. Thank you.
Yeah, don't be afraid to interrupt if you have a question. Your screen is going to look different once you get access, because it will be with the nursing, but basically you will be going into the registration management desktop. And so you just click on that, and then a registration screen is going to pop up. If you do a lookup, you can either hit the arrow or the F9 key. Instead of all those different numbers that we used to have, it's now inpatient, observation, no more hold in observation, the term is observation, newborn, clinical, emergency room, so on and so forth. And a lot of these you will not use. Labs, x-rays, those will all be under clinical. So I'm going to do an inpatient. It's pretty much the same whether you do an inpatient or a lab, except for the last screen. But I'm going to choose the long form, and I'm going to use myself as a test patient. So I typed in my name and I hit enter, and it's going to bring up past history of all of Test Patricias that have been in here. And everything that is grayed out are accounts that you cannot use. Accounts that are grayed or dark are accounts that are current. Since this is an inpatient account, I don't want to choose any of these emergency department or lab accounts or this cardiology one. So I don't want any of those accounts, so I'm just going to hit cancel. Come down, put in my date of birth, and just scroll through. This is making a new account for me. And now it's saying, okay, it's searched using the information that I gave the system, and it's saying, okay, is this your patient? Yes, this is me, so therefore I will choose that account. It's saying that I already have a clinic account. Do I want to create a new one? Yes, because I am now an inpatient. Okay, now it says I'm a VIP. Well, we all know how special I am. But we do have, the Meditech system does have a VIP. There will be talk on whether or not we use this. It can be used for a variety of different things. One thing you can use it for is to restrict access to certain patients. Say by chance we did have someone famous in here, we could put them as a VIP and only certain people would have access to that account. There's also been talk of using VIP as for the special needs patients. So that way when, and not restricting access, but then when that patient comes in, they know right away that that is a special needs patient. You'll know more when we know more on whether or not we're going to use that. So basically it brings in all my information, my name, my date of birth, my street address. Anything that has an asterisk has to be filled out. So if you see this alternate address, that's just basically saying, do they want their bills going somewhere else? It defaults in no, so you just have to enter past that. You just fill in the information. Now when you get to the social security number, I have used this particular social security number on a lot of test patients. When you have parents come in with children and they don't have their social, I know a lot of times you guys put the 9s in there. So you will see this error a lot when you put in the 9s. But you just enter past it, not a problem. If you have their employer information, you can do a lookup and pick the employer. There's a bunch of different employers in here, but if you pick the employer, it will automatically pull in the information for you. If there is an employer that you seem to be using a lot, let us know. Write a note on admissions, and admissions will let me know, and I'll build that employer. Contact information, that's next of kin and person to notify. In Healthland, that's contact 1 and contact 2. Same thing, you put in the person's name. If the address is the same as the patient, you can put SP and it will pull in all of the patient's address, city, state, phone number. Now, on the relationship to patient, you can do a lookup. And there are quite a few relationships that you can choose. Husband, wife, father, mother, child. Those are going to be your more common ones. Other relationship would be like friend. Cadaver donor, no, you're probably not going to use that. So there are some you're going to use and some you're not going to use. And then your person to notify, same thing. So that's pretty simple. The guarantor, say your guarantor was the patient, you would put SP, and that's going to pull in all the patient information. If your guarantor was the same person as the next of kin, you can type in SNOK, S-N-O-K, and that will pull in all of your next of kin information. Or if it was the guarantor was the person to notify that you had filled out there, you can put S-P-O-N, and it will pull in all of that information. So that makes it easy. Guarantor employer, same thing. I have a lot of employers built. Insurance, you will always, right now, your current process is that you leave it or put self-pay for SP. That won't change. You'll make copies of the cards and give those to us, and then we'll add the insurance. So that process will stay the same. Bar information, you're not going to use these screens, so you don't have to worry about it. Provider, yes, you will be using these providers. You just go through, and this is an inpatient account. You put in the admitting doctor and the attending. And that's it for this screen. And then for the visit, you can do a lookup. Okay, I'm going to choose that this is a medical patient. The admit priority is an emergency. Restrict directory disclosure. That's saying restrict disclosure for the patient, for religion, both or none. So the patient doesn't want anybody to know that they're here, or the patient doesn't want their religious organization, pastor, minister, whatever, to know that they're here. You can choose both, you can choose none. Expected length of stay, you don't have to worry about that. You go over to the admit date, it's going to pop in the admit date and the admit time for you. Requested accommodations. That is either semi-private or private. Our rooms are semi-private or private. Now all the 100s are currently private rooms. In the Meditech system, we have them set up as semi-private, so that way we can have more people in the system playing and practicing, and we don't run out of beds. So if they request a private room, you would put a P, request, or semi-private. You choose the room that they want to be in, or that you're putting them in, and then choose bed 1 or bed 2. If you have a male in a bed and you are registering a female patient, and you pick the same room that a male is in, you will get a warning saying there is a sex mismatch. It's a soft warning, you can just enter past it, because sometimes husbands and wives like to be in the same room together. So you can still do that, it just gives you a warning. And that's it, and then you just save it. And once you save it, you're going to get a couple pop-ups. This one will print your admission form. Normally you would print the admission form at this time, you would say yes, and then have the patient sign it. We're not going to worry about that today. Then another pop-up will be your account number and your medical record number. And then the next one, this is your scanning screen. This is where you would press the scan button and scan all your stuff. You currently don't have a scanner, so you don't have to worry about it. You can just close out or hit the escape button. So that patient is now registered. It's really not a difficult process, you just follow the screens. Same as before.
We do want to add that the guarantor, we're used to seeing a pop-up if we try and put a guarantor in that's 18 years or younger. That does not exist in the system, or did it come up for you?
Well, I don't know.
Our specialist has added a pop-up that it will give you an indication when the patient is 18 years or younger. It isn't going to require password like in the health plan system. You will be able to bypass it, but we do ask that that is not your practice, because we should be having, depending on the situation, usually the guarantor for an 18 years and younger would be somebody other than the child. So we do ask that you make sure that you do not bypass that. Also, some things that are a little bit different, we know that the scheduled ERs, that's a terminology within our facility, just like we've said holding observations in the past, and we've said floor patients in the past. Those are unique to our facility. And those are issues that we need to address as a facility, how we will handle those. They will fall into, we're thinking they'll fall into scheduled ERs because of the location. They'll be an ER. We will keep you up to date on what's decided about that. Floor patients, we have to decide where they're going to fall into. Like Patty said, hold an observation is something that was our facility, and now we just refer to it as observation. The other thing that we did notice that was actually brought up in an earlier class this week, there was nothing about privacy notices like there is in our current system. That also is being added. We're going to be adding that through a customer-defined screen, so that you will be seeing. I've been told that we need to update our privacy notices, so we're hoping to coordinate that with our go live date of June 1st, because that information doesn't flow over from the Healthland system. So as long as we're having to get new ones, we might as well be doing the new form. So that is something that we will be doing on every single patient. One thing that we had hoped for was electronic signatures. That is not something that Meditech offers at this time. We can get it through another vendor. That comes at an additional cost. That's not going to be happening at this time. So we can look forward to that in the future in electronic form. So one thing that they do have is the ability to have a camera. Now, we will have a camera. It won't be like, I don't know if it still floats around in ER, different places, a regular digital camera. We don't intend to use that type of a camera. It's more what you see in other doctors' offices, maybe like a ball style one. You just hold it up, you take a picture of the patient. That's becoming very common within, dental offices, medical offices, and so we don't know the frequency at which we're going to be doing that within the hospital setting, the clinic setting. That is something that I don't feel should be my decision alone. That needs to be a facility-wide decision. Obviously, you have a trauma patient, you're not going to be taking a picture of them. I believe that we have to, most patients that come in here aren't going to be looking their best. So we just need to not get hung up on the idea that the patient needs to primp or anything. It's just a matter of you take your picture and go. It's an identity thing. It's a security thing. And I think we've all experienced or have heard about all the stories that come through ER and all those different places. It's an incorrect identity. We've had experiences in the past where ER techs have identified patients by, just memory of looking them up. We had one individual, we found that they had been in here, I think, under 3 or 4 identities. And had that ER tech not been able to piece that together, we would have never known that. And that individual actually even, and I'm not encouraging this, but they actually ran out and even took down a driver's, the driver's license, or the
Plate number.
Plate number. Couldn't spit that out, so sorry. So it's those kind of things that it may seem like taking a person's picture each time they come in or frequently is not necessary, but it really does help. And people's appearances do change, There's a lot of people that color their hair, those types of things. So it is a security thing that Meditech does offer, and we will be taking advantage of that.
So if they, on something like that, then will there be something built into the admission thing that gives permission to do such a thing? Because, a lot of the others, you can't take pictures of other patients or anybody else in the hospital. So it's like a privacy thing in a way, isn't
very
it?
likely, and that may be part of the privacy notice thing. I'm not for sure, and we will address that. I'm glad you brought that up, because we will check into that, where that permission is actually given. And I can't say myself, I've been at places that do that, and I don't remember signing anything, but I'm sure it was in the fine print somewhere that I signed saying they could take my picture. And but it's
one of them forms you just don't read. You just
probably that's probably
blah,
what
blah,
happened.
blah.
Okay, just let me get.
We just well, sometimes we probably do that a little bit too much. As far as, like I said, the whole admissions process is truly the accuracy and completeness, the communication between yourselves, the admissions staff, myself, as we're preparing for it. Certainly, Patty, you can call us, you can email us. You're one step ahead of the admissions staff. We've not had their formal training for the admissions on the Meditech side. They've had training for the clinic side, the LSS. So if you did not know that that's what the clinic portion was called, that's the LSS portion of the Meditech company. So you will be hearing that also. I don't know if you wanted to go through
A lab.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm going to show you a lab real quick just to show you the difference. on that. Like I said, that will be a clinical. And I do the exact same steps. Now this does say I have pre-registered for a clinic lab account. So I can choose that one if that's the one I need, or I can create a new one. Now I'm not going to choose this one because this person has a different date of birth. That is a different Patricia. That would actually be Patty Peterson's account that she created. So I do not want to choose her account, so I'm going to say cancel. Put in the patient's date of birth. And this is the person that I want, so I'm going to choose myself. I'm going to create a new account. And the same thing, your patient, your contact, your guarantor, your insurance, your bar information, it is the exact same screens. The only thing different is I forgot, you have to do the alternate address there. So I go down to provider. I only have to fill out the attending provider. And then I go to the visit portion. And instead, where I had to choose a room and all that, service date, service time, the priority, I'm going to say it's an elective lab, and the location is lab. That's it. That is really the only difference between a lab and an inpatient, or an outpatient and an inpatient. It's pretty similar. You're going to get the same stuff at once you save it. This is where you would print your admission form and have them sign it. Then the account number and the medical record number will pop up. And then you can bypass this because you don't scan. Most of these over here on the side you will not use. You're not going to schedule or pre-register patients. Register is what we're using. Check-in, you're not going to use. Revisit, that's more for your physical therapy, your speech therapy, occupational therapy. Bed request, I suppose if you knew a patient was coming in and they were very specific about the room and bed number that they wanted, you could use that. But I don't know if you guys ever had that situation. Like, I want 210 by the window. You know, that if you do, then you can use that. This in and out transfer, we are going to do, we'll either have handouts or we'll do more extensive training right before we go live. But we will go over like the in and out transfer and the change status. And, you know, if you mess something up, how you can edit it or undo it. Discharge, I know you'll be using that in your clinical system, but it looks just like this. So I will go through a discharge real quick. And so I'm going to discharge myself, and I was an inpatient. If you're popping in from one screen to another screen, but you're working on the same patient, most of the time you can use the spacebar enter, and it will pop in that same account. Okay, this is the account that I want to discharge, so I'm going to choose that account. Takes me right to the discharge screen, the discharge date, the discharge time, and the discharge disposition. You can do a lookup, and these are all the different ways you can be discharged. This is what, are you coming up with a better thing on this part of it?
Yes, I was talking to Patsy about this earlier. We will have a little guide for you. This isn't very descriptive, and so we'll have basically, you'd say, a little cheat sheet to assist you in this.
But most of them that you will probably use are home, and so I will choose that, and then you save it, and you've discharged a patient. It's really easy. Now, I know most of the time, well, probably all of the time, you will actually be doing ERs through the ER module. But if for some reason you are in the admissions module, and ER is really easy to do, most of the time for an emergency room, I've been showing you the long form because you have time. An emergency room situation, that's a trauma or whatever, you don't have the time. Your focus is getting that patient entered, so that way you can start lab, you can start medications, you can start treating the patient. So you would use a short form. So then you would just choose the person. And really all that's here is it pulls in really quick the information. You put in the emergency room doctor. And then you just admit, date, time, your priority. It's going to be an emergency, and location, emergency department. And that's it. And then you would save that. Now, later on, after you've taken care of the patient and you have all of the information that you need to fill out get their guarantor and all that information, then you can go into the edit. And it's automatically going to pop in that long form. And then this is where you can put in finish filling out the information. But like I said, most of the time you'll be using for emergencies, you'll be using the emergency room module.
We did have the opportunity to view that module. I think it was on Tuesday afternoon. We did finally get to see that. And as far as, it's very much like this. Really, the screens don't look really any different than that. So certainly you're in the emergency room. You'll be admitting people through there. I believe in the beginning they call it reception. That's kind of where your short form is being done. And I don't want to say things prematurely for those people that are going to be doing the training in there, but we do ask that before that patient goes home that you make sure that you do complete that admission, because face-to-face is always better.
It will not let them discharge the patient without going to the full registration screen. I have tested.
Oh, really? So your
And
discharge
I will be
will be
training
the full registration. Okay, good.
They will have to. It goes back and makes them repopulate that full screen before it will let them put a discharge date and time on the patient.
And that's really important.
Awesome.
I'm extremely happy about that, because it's so much easier to get information face to face than it is for the admission staff. They do it, they go back and they clean things up and they get the information, but it's a struggle to get that, especially if we don't have phone numbers, that kind of thing. So that's going to be a wonderful, wonderful thing that, because if we have the right information, we share it out correctly, everybody gets paid. And that's a key factor there. As far as, I just want to point out, within the emergency room setting, you want to remember, because of EMTALA, the screening has to be done before you can ask for any kind of insurance information. So we want to remind you, do not ask for insurance cards prior to the screening being done, because it can be interpreted that you're asking for payment. That's the same in the Meditech system as it is in the Healthland system. It's a process. So those processes are not changing. It's just demographic, insurance information, a different place to put it. That's really what it comes down to. You will be getting access. I don't believe any of you actually have access to these screens yet. The nursing staff will make sure that you have that and you can practice. We felt like there was sufficient amount of time, knowing that we just had about an hour to train you. We didn't think it was going to be that effective to have you all trying to focus on your screens. And so you should have sufficient amount of time to practice within the system And like we've said in the past, if you have any questions, I want to point out, if you saw on the screens, we talked about our current system having all the different patient types and the new one not having very many. It's all because now we're relying upon the locations. So if you notice there, really a lot of the locations are what we consider patient types now. Anybody have any other questions?
You guys are a quiet group.
They're independent learners. We figured that out. Sorry, they are quiet, but they usually find the answers to their own questions.
Do you guys use a lot more keyboard strokes?
I do. I'm not a big mouse person, to be honest.
You should get us a cheat sheet with it.
Okay. Okay, I'll see what I can find. I think we do have some cheat sheets on different keyboard strokes, like F12 will save, escape will get you out, F9 will, you can use F9 instead of hitting the arrow. In the beginning, I know it's a pain to be doing a lookup and looking at all the different things, but do that just to make sure you're picking the correct option. Later on, you'll have that memorized and everything on what you need to put in. But when you first start out, do the lookup, look at your options, and see what all you have there.
Those keystrokes, I think there's a handout in the very first section of your binder. It might be like right after the outline, I think it's maybe the first page. And it's 3 pages of keystroke functions.
Yeah, right at the very front.
Oh, okay, well then you already have that.
If you're missing that, Logan, let me know, because if you're a keyboard person, that's your Bible. So.
Yep, they're on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a keyboard person too, and mouse is just a pain.
Do you want a copy of my worksheet? Do you have that already?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We greatly appreciate the time. Like I said before, any questions, just give us a call or email us.
Yes. We're always available.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yes. Fun stuff.
I don't need you to
Yes.
spot. It'll be so fun.
Yeah. So good. That's why I always bring my own pass. Alright, you're long enough. I got things to do today now.
I'm not going to do that. Will you guys be snacking this afternoon?
Celebrate.
Already?
Yeah.
What we don't snack on when they leave, then you can take it.
Okay.
Did you read what it says under? Oh no, you didn't. Spike comforting.
I gotta take a bunch of photos.
It says, according to Pinky Pain, appointment 3/10/12. It's 5 o'clock somewhere, probably the weight loss clinic, which he refuses to attend unless it's happy hour. Gets combative and extra sort of.
You took your clothes there, and then she slept on that, or you get
Hey, just an FYI, I am the one who created your test accounts. So if your date of births are extremely incorrect, it's because I was just guessing.
It's random.
It's random.
Just guessing. No, thank you.
Some will be complimented, some will be offended.
I think I was 98 one day.
I think somebody's 14, you know.
Yeah.
It's
It all
okay.
works. Thank you. Thanks. So that was like a really good review of our admissions form, the long routine, which we will review again, like Patsy was saying, the first week of April when we have training for the ER module. We go over those routines again. But because it's kind of a long, lengthy routine, they have some nice little tidbits of information that they can add that we might not know about. So it was just important to have them here to talk to us about it today. So thank you for your time and attention. And they let out a little bit early. So, like the first day, we were crunching to get them in within an hour. And today, they've decreased their time by half. Did they go pretty quick?
Yeah.
Was it a pretty fast clip? Were you able to follow along okay?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions about the handouts that they gave you? Everybody got one? The screenshots, it kind of explains the flow. Keep those in your binder because we'll reference those again during ER training. We'll have those screenshots already, so we'll just review your notes on it. So, the next step will be to look at the past medical history. At this time, It's 72 degrees outside or better. It's gorgeous. It's your lucky day if you happen to be an ER tech, a ward clerk, or a CNA, because you're dismissed early and you get to go out.
Does that mean we get to get dismissed early since they only lasted half
I'm
an
gonna
hour?
try my best to get you out of here a little early today, because it is gorgeous. It's a shame to be in here. If for some reason you're curious about the nurse's process when they're documenting these things, feel free to stay. You would volunteer your time and efforts to do that, and you would forego the beautiful weather, so I'm sure it's not a very attractive option. And we would question your mental health if you stayed, but I guess you're just really curious. Have a great day. Oh, before you leave, I'm going to do this drawing, okay? That way if we have somebody that wins in the room. Okay, so okay, Mikal, since you stood up and I didn't even ask for a volunteer, I'm going to have you cover your eyes or close them, and I'm going to lead you over here so that way you can't see anything. And I'm going to spin you, and then reach your hand, reach your hand right here, and then just out of this, now pick a number. Or pick a name, I guess it is. Yep, pick a number.
Well, Kathy's gonna like me.
Kathy Bowman.
Kathy!
All right, thank you, Mikal. You want to deliver this to Kathy? Get a $5 gift card to Subway. Thank you. And now for the $40 drawing for the gas card this week. No, I just come back. Andrea. Sufficiently swirled. All right. Carrie Holderman. She won the $40 gas card this week. So if you see Carrie, tell her congratulations.
You should just give it to me.
When they win it, I take their name out for that. They get one less chance to win it the next time. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye.
Carrie Holderman. That's not good. Did it totally?
You just put in your password here, unless you normal
Yeah.
password.
That's happened to me on this laptop before, but don't worry.
I was trying.
Yeah, you did.
That doesn't do it. Redo it. No, it didn't.
Let's see if I can get logged back in. All right, we're still recording.
I'm gonna build up myself so I
There we go. Get logged back in here.
Let's try a different password.
It should be like your main Windows login. Is it case sensitive? Like do you have caps lock on or something?
No, I took caps off.
Oh, computers. We would live with them if the government, without them if the government would let us, but now the government is mandating that we use computers. And for working with computers for so many months now, I'm still not a computer person. In fact, I'm probably worse. Probably have a worse opinion than when I started.
I got it. Finally.
Yay!
It just takes a few times.
Yeah, takes a few times. Alrighty. So we're on the status board. Somebody's been editing my access because lunch isn't even find the count. Alright. So we're in the open chart on the work list. We have all of these lovely interventions here. I did its and assessments. In your binder, do you guys remember I pointed out that past medical history worksheet? It's in kind of in the middle of the section. It's actually right before the right notes towards the back. And it's kind of halfway through. And you have two handouts that look like this. these go together. And then this is the instruction set for it. Any copies of this? Because sometimes the copy machines get hot and they skip a page like it did to Amy earlier. So I'm kind of concerned if you have it, because sometimes you're missing on the page. This is care plan section, so it's actually still going to be part of this.
Is this in a different section, Jess?
No, it's in
Same section we've been in?
the work list, yeah. And it's right before the right notes routine. There you go. Good deal. Kevin, you're good? Yep. All right. Keep going. There you go. Good. And you have the second page that goes with this? Screenshot. Those copy machines get hot and sometimes yours is black and white.
Yeah.
You don't? Huh. Everybody else is in color. Well, Patsy, I'm glad you know what the color screens look like. That you live it 3 days a week, so I guess it works out pretty. All right. So we're going to go ahead and go into the past medical history document by clicking in the Now box and hitting the document footer button.
Jess, I did
What's that?
something wrong. Click the thing that says something about something and I got this up.
Oh,
And
yes.
I can't restore the preferences.
Just hit, did you save it already? This is that no button.
I know.
Yeah, and it was an accident. It can happen very easily. It's just an accident. So hit cancel and don't save it. Okay, good. Phew.
Okay.
It takes me a while to restore it. I know, right?
Yeah.
Yay. Okay, so click on PMH, past medical history. Go ahead and find this on your screen. Click it now, and then hit document. And then don't click on anything once you're in there, okay? I'd like to explain some of the features of this document. We've kind of seen, oh, did it open for you?
Not yet.
Is it thinking about it?
My name's
Just thinking.
I don't think mine's thinking.
Computers. There probably aren't. They require us to think for them, but
There we go.
they require us to
It
think.
takes a while.
Right there, right? That's
Oh,
mine.
check your
And you're like, it'll be faster now.
This one's a big one, so it takes a little bit to load it. And then when we're all going into this big routine at the same time, it's not too often that you're going to have, 6, 10 people getting into that big document at the same time, because we don't have that much new admissions. But this is a form that we'll fill out for every new patient in our ER and on the floor. And we're going to ask that the surgery team does this for their patients. And we're also going to talk to the clinic and see how they're recording this information and see if we can get them on board with us too for our facility. But this is a way that we can document past medical history. And don't really click on anything yet for answers, but just use your scroll bar. And what you're seeing in front of you is the different body systems that we're going to collect history about. It's kind of separated by body systems. And then we have a smoking and tobacco section. The government mandates that any patient 13 years and older is screened for smoking history and is offered smoking cessation classes, and we have to submit this to federal regulations. And then at the very bottom, we kind of have this other miscellaneous, and we're kind of working to maybe still categorize some of these things in with the other body systems. They're just hanging out there to let us know we still need to find a category. So hopefully we can get this miscellaneous one weeded down a little bit. But if it doesn't seem to fit in somewhere else, it's in there for now. And then at the very bottom, it's family medical history. And it has all of those body systems listed again. So what we're seeing here is the patient's personal medical history. If it's a family medical history, then we come at the bottom and open up that system and we can chart it in there. It's extensive,
And the reason that this document has so many history questions, if you look at this other medical history of this, yes or no, heat stroke, yes or no, it lists a lot of medical diagnoses and patient health problems in this document. I mean, there's literally probably 1,000 in here. It's a lot of questions. But the great thing is we don't have to answer only the positives. And this is something that we have a policy on, that we only document the positive history. We don't have to go through and answer every one of these questions, okay? So it's gonna make it a little easier. I know it looks daunting right now, but the beauty about this document is that once you document the patient's history and you save it, it will appear in the patient care tab of the EMR. These are like the pages in the chart, right? So you go to like the nursing tab, the patient care tab, you click on history, and anything that's documented as a history will appear here. So then the next time the patient comes to the hospital, the first time they're entered into the Meditech system, we do this. The next time we can click here into this history and review it with the patient and ask them if there's any changes or any differences, and they're like, no, that's all the same stuff. So then all we have to do is open up that document that we were just looking at, the past medical history, and then we can hit recall, which, as we know, recalls in the answers from the previous. But this document doesn't just recall answers from this visit. It recalls it from the last time the patient was here, no matter what visit number. It's always at the medical record number. So we recall and save, no changes, we've updated it. That's like 3 clicks. However, the first time we fill it out, it's huge, and it does take a little time. But we're doing efficient work, and we're doing accurate work the first time we do it, so that the next time, maybe it's us, maybe it's a different nurse, we'll reap the benefit of that work. And we'll also have an accurate history listed in here. So the patient comes in unconscious for some reason in the ER, and we need to know, are they diabetic? Are these things happening? They have no family. We don't know anything about the scene. We can click into their EMR history. If we've had in Meditech before, we can pull up the most recent past medical history without having to open up a bunch of charts or go to medical records. It's right there at our fingertips.
But now, like, if somebody comes in that you can't get all that information from, then you'll still be able to go through the form and get through the form without.
Exactly. Like if they come in and they've never been here before, but they're unconscious, we have these buttons, unable to assess, that we would need to document. But then the next time, if you're the nurse that pulls up that history and you see,
Get to that history again?
click on the patient care tab.
Patient care.
Yep, it's the body button, and it's the history button on the top. If you see a whole bunch of responses here that says unable to assess, and the patient is now alert on their next visit, we know that we need to go in and revisit those things. That the first time, whatever reason, they couldn't assess it. So now we have some more work to do, even though this is the second time they're admitted to our hospital where we're using Meditech.
Okay, so like you do an admission thing and that's the case. You know, somebody comes in, you can't assess it, but then a day later they're fine, they're just wonderful. Do you go back into your form then, and then do you fill it out the best as you can?
Absolutely. During the same visit, yeah, you can go in and fill it out again. Like they were unconscious, now they're not. They're more
So you can
coherent.
just pull it back up and go in and answer.
Yep.
You'll be able to change it. Will it be an edit thing that you have to edit button?
Yes, you can go in and you can just edit the one that you did if you're the one that documented it the first
What if
day.
you're not?
And if you're not, then you just enter in a new one. And the new one that you enter overrides the old one. So every time we go in and update this form, those answers update. So we filled it out. The first day we had unable to assess on everything. The second day we completed it in its entirety. The patient's discharged. The next time they come in for a visit, guess which one that pulls up? The best one.
So it's gonna.
The accurate
So you're gonna have a whole new one up. Like she admitted the first time.
Mhm.
The next day I'm gonna go in there and say, well, we can answer these questions now. So I'm gonna have a whole new thing to start all over with.
Yes, because if she wasn't able to answer any of the questions the first time, then it's going to say all unable to assess, pretty much. You might have a little bit of information from an EMT or a family member, limited information to update, and then the patient's coherent and good historian, so you can rely on the information that they're telling you and you can enter it in here.
And it would be like those recall buttons. What you would do is you would enter and say, Kathy did the assessment on day 1 and there was no coherency to assess. So all unable to assess. Day 2, you want to come in and edit it. You can't edit it because it's Kathy's document, it's not yours to edit. You open a new one, you recall the answers, it recalls Kathy's answers. So if family said, I know he's diabetic, but everything else I have no idea. So she has one answer that says diabetic and everything else unable to assess. You just flip those enable to assess buttons over to yes or no, if appropriate, and then you can edit it from there, but Kathy's diabetic answer would still be in there. And you could even edit her answer on the diabetes. If the patient said, I'm not diabetic, what are they talking about? You can change that to reflect it as the accurate history. You can also use resources like we do now, like we pull a medical chart, we pull a history from maybe they're a swing bed and we receive them and it has a nice H&P from another physician, and we use those things. We can enter that into our record here. It's just, we want to get as much legitimate medical history on file as possible.
So if like Sandy would edit something Kathy put in, would you still be able to go back and see that like this is what Kathy put in and then Sandy edited it?
Yep.
It.
Well, it would
It'd
actually
be
show
2 different separate.
It will show 2 separate ones?
2 separate ones.
Okay.
Yep. And so you go by the most recent one.
Okay.
Exactly. What is it, Kathy?
I don't know.
At least you're honest, I guess.
You're trying to get to this document? Or is it, are you kind of like?
Well, I'm just doing some other stuff.
You were working ahead on something? I kind of wondered.
But then I got out of that, now I can't get back to it.
Okay. So you are in
Patient care,
the,
open
let's see.
chart. I'm in the open chart.
That's a good time.
yeah, you're in
And I
the
click on
patient
patient care.
And so that history.
It's great.
Tired,
tired,
nothing's
freezing.
been charted.
Reading?
Like this
Squeeze
one.
Well, I was, and then I put my bracket on.
I have to
So there's nothing to view in your patient.
Yeah, I was wondering that too.
There is no
history
history.
I didn't know if it was under, if it would be under systems,
It'll
but I
let
didn't
you,
click.
once you document
Like
on
if you
this
could click,
PMH
like,
history, then
Because
you
we
can
have
go
cancer.
in there and look.
Do you have the PMH
Yeah.
document open already? Do you still have it open? Did you close out of it?
Status bar.
So I'm going to show you what it looks like on a patient when you do have a history on there. We're going to go in and put a few history items on our test patients, and then we'll be able to view it in the record.
I think you closed your document. Go back to your work list.
Jessica, on the family history, there's no family cancer.
Past click.
It's got cancer up above, but doesn't have family history of
Yes.
cancer.
Yes.
I'm clicking here now.
You know, I made a note on that on Monday's class.
It's say document.
I'll make another note just in case.
Yeah, you'll
Yeah,
have
there's
this
some stuff
open.
in there.
Once you
that-
document
When
in
you're going
here,
in and finding that stuff, make a note of it.
and once you document in here, Kathy, and save it, when you go to that patient care
Like
button,
the,
there will be a.
in that other,
This,
the blood
this is
transfusions?
Yeah.
To me, that would go under
document.
hematologic disorders.
Well, I had to it before and then
Go under
I
like
was.
anemia.
I think you asked
Yeah.
again.
We'll get into it.
Get back to it.
Yes.
For me, half the time I
You're
get
good now.
screwed up because I get to a different screen and I can't get back to the one I
Yep.
wanted.
And usually it's those body buttons on the right, so you can't go wrong with clicking back to work list and going from there. Everybody has the PMH document open though? Mine is minimized on my screen, so I'm just gonna look at my tiles at the bottom and then bring it back up again. Because I can start this and then I can minimize it, look at something in the chart, and then I can come back to it. I can open it up and I can just click on the history, review it with the patient, then I can maximize this again, and I can just hit, if it had been done before and I hit recall, I would have recall buttons that would come up. Since this is the first time, when I hit recall, nothing happens. There's nothing to recall. And then I would remember those, the buttons that appear next to the check mark. When you click that, it recalls like the whole section. Oh, there it went. It was just a little slow. Well, I don't know why it lets me recall now because there's nothing to recall, but if I was to recall here and there had been an answer, it would fill in. And then see when I recalled, it lets me review the information that I recalled, which for this case happens to be nothing. And so it expands this ears, nose, and throat history. And when you scroll down, it's organized by diseases and disorders first, and these are alphabetical order. And then when you come to the next section, it's treatments and interventions related to eye, ears, nose, and throat. And you scroll down again, this is alphabetical, and then you look at signs and symptoms. And it might have some issues here, and you go down and it's alphabetical. So it's broken up into 3 sections for each body system, and those are listed alphabetically. The very last thing that's listed as a question for each body area is a comment section. This comment line is limited to 1 line only, which is 75 characters. And you know how in our admission assessment in Healthland we just free text our past medical history in there? It's not what this is for. And the reason that we can't just type in, we can like say, oh, I just am not going to answer all of these ridiculous 50,000 questions on each thing, you know, I'm just going to free text it in here. And then I'll be done faster. The problem with that is that the physicians will use our documentation of past medical history to populate their H&P. They use it to help code the diagnosis upon discharge. It relies on what we enter here in the front lines upon admission. And so if we enter only comments in here, by the time they're ready to discharge and code it and try and get paid for this case, or the physician's documenting it won't pull into their PDoc the way that Meditech has set it up to do, then the finger's going to point back at whoever went in and charted on just comments in here. So you guys are smart. You're going to figure out no time flat that you can put a comment in there and save it and be done really fast. However, it throws off the sequence of the rest of the visit for the patients, the different departments that handle the patient's account.
How did you get that, all that, where you had all
To
the different
expand
things that come up underneath
You know,
of?
and I was just demonstrating the recall.
No, I meant how she.
So you're working
Okay,
ahead a
yes.
little bit. So time
How about
out.
like ENT.
Time out for a second. Time out for a second. So I was just demonstrating the recall. There's nothing to recall. So when you do recall, it expands everything, whether there's something in there or not, and you can just scroll past it. So now let's say I'm not in recall mode, and I'm actually going to go in and chart on something. So I have to come down here to demo this on the neurologic medical history. But if your ENT isn't expanded yet, you can just look at that one. So these are set up. Do you notice that these have an asterisk and they're all mandatory queries because they have an asterisk on them? I can't save this document until I answer those. And so like my ears, nose, and throat, you have to answer yes, no, or unable to assess. I'm going to answer no on this one. And notice that even though there's nothing in here that stayed expanded, it was because I recalled it that way. But how it works the first time, if you don't use the recall, the first time you're documenting this stuff, which is how it would really be, on neuro, notice when I push the yes button, actually I'm going to push the unable to assess first. When I push no, nothing happens. It just says no history. Cardiac, when I push unable to assess, nothing happens, I'm just not able to assess it. Now look at my respiratory. When I push yes on respiratory, it launches me into that long list. And so that's how you would get that long list there. But the reason I had it first was because of that recall. So once I hit yes, it automatically highlights that it wants me to go through and answer the yeses. Now, for me, it's not time efficient for me to sit here and ask every question. Do you have a history of asbestos? Do you have a history of asthma? Do you have a history of bronchitis, COPD, cystic fibrosis? I'm not going to go through that whole list. I'm going to ask the patient, do you have any respiratory disorders, respiratory histories, family history of allergies, asthma, surgeries? What do you have in your respiratory area? Nothing? Okay, then I answer no. Yes, I have asthma. And then I just say, okay, yes, you have asthma. Have you ever had to have surgery for your asthma? Do you have any constant signs and symptoms? Well, I charted that he has asthma. Maybe they have dyspnea with it. But the dyspnea is really related to the asthma. This dyspnea question is more like it's dyspnea, but we don't have a diagnosis of asthma yet, right? It's like sometimes I get short of breath with activity. That could lead to CHF, not asthma, right? So we have a symptom of dyspnea, but we don't have a diagnosis. So we can chart that they have chronic dyspnea. We're trying to figure out why this is a problem. It'll flag the physician to that problem when we chart it here. As long as we click the yes and we don't free text it in. If we free text it, then nobody else can use it. Wheezing,
So like if they were to say, well, I occasionally have difficulty breathing, do you go to the comment and make a comment then?
Absolutely. Occasionally. If I spelled it completely wrong. Is that right?
Sorry.
All of a sudden I can't spell. How do you spell this?
That's good.
All right. So you only answer the yeses. And the reason for that is if I go through here and I answer a bunch of no's and I save this, and it's not going to let me save it until I go in and I edit and say, I'm just going to say I'm unable to assess these so I can demonstrate this. And I got like 12, I think there's 12 in here that I have to answer. So set a little bit of time in your day for the first time they're in. Whoop, actually I wanted this one. Lucky for me that was a short one. And then, okay, now I should be able to save it. I just want to demonstrate this for you. I'm going to refresh my EMR, and I'm in history, and when I click on positives, anything with a yes shows, but not every respiratory question shows in here, because that would just be exhausting to try and read, right? And so my comment even shows. But do you notice that that little comment that I texted in and typed in doesn't show here? Those comments will never show in this area. What's up, Molly? You look like you have a
Well,
question.
just, you know, you said the asterisks, you have to fill it in, so each of those head things, you do have, if it's got an asterisk, you have to fill it in, yes.
Yep, that first
Or no.
question for the body system.
Okay, I just learned that now, I didn't understand that before.
Okay, yeah.
So on the smoking status, if they've never smoked, you still have to mark initiate education on smoking cessation?
Yeah, it needs a little perfection, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Needs a little TLC. Some of those, I know, it doesn't make sense to me.
I mean, why doesn't it default to no if you answer no?
If you answer no, it could
Yeah.
default to no. Some of those, and the answer would be no. But some of these, the answers that are listed, like the multiple choice to pick from, are actually even mandated from the government. Like exactly what we have to put as a multiple choice item for that question comes from federal regulations. And so they don't always make the most sense to a clinician. You know,
No.
and I mean, to me, it's like the Attorney General, I just want to write him a letter and be like, what are you thinking when you're making this?
But you can't make
multiple
it,
choice?
if it says never smoked, it can't just default to no on the education for smoking cessation? If they've never smoked, they don't need education on smoking cessation.
If they've never smoked, I might be able to like suppress it now or something like that. It's a work under progress. There's a lot of like background building and programming that you can do. It's time consuming and complicated, and honestly, I would hope to have that done in the next year because it'll take that long to get it accomplished. For now, that little no thing is just going to be in there to bother you for a little while, but it's really because we have limited resources to try and build it in. So eventually, we can put the polish on it and it can do all those bells and whistles. But today, and by June, I don't think it's going to be quite where we want it yet. It's a work in progress, a jar of clay. So here's the positives. When I click on all responses, I have all of the no's. Do you see here, I have that comment now that I can see, that free text comment that I put in under the all responses. And anything I answered as no shows up here. Anything I answered as unable to assess shows up here, right? So if I have a whole bunch of stuff and I answer no to every question, you can see that this list would get pretty exhausting too, which is exactly why we don't chart the no's. There's very rare instances where you would ever chart a history question as a no. You would chart a body system as a no. If you charted a body system as a yes, and then you just said yes to asthma, yes to dyspnea, you don't have to go in and say no to everything else. the reason for that is it's basically that charting by exception, and there's a policy that can back it up. If it's not answered, it means it's a negative. If it's answered, it's a positive. So this is one of the instances where you can get away with not having to document on every question in there, right? Charting by exception. So I've filed a past medical history on my patient. I'm going to go in here and open it up again, so I'll have about the same screen as you all do. And you see I'm charting a new occurrence, not editing my old one, so I have a blank slate again. When I hit recall, now that I'm in recall mode, I have the option to recall the question or the entire section. In past medical history, you're going to just want to hit the diamond that's right above the yes, no, and able to assess. Because remember what happened to me when I hit the diamond for that whole ear, nose, throat section? It opened up all of those responses. If this is a no, and I hit recall, it'll bring in the no and it won't open up all that stuff. But if I hit this one, it opens it up, whether it's a no or a yes. So the rule to follow on this is going to be to use the diamond recall button that's right above the body system question. Just like that. And now, when I'm here on respiratory, it's a yes, and I only recalled that question. So now I'm going to recall the whole section. When I recall the whole section, it shows me that this was a yes, and dyspnea occasionally is a yes. It defaults in, so I wouldn't have to edit it, right? But then my no's are here, and I know that, hey, I thought we were taught not to put no's in there, so I'm going to uncheck these, and that way it'll save and update the medical record, so those won't show up anymore. And I did that by just clicking on it. So if you click on a no by accident, and you're like, well, now I have to get yes to get it to go away. No, you just click on it again, and it takes the donut out, takes the circle out, okay? So I can recall all my little questions here. I can go in and save it. So far I'm lucky and there's not a lot of history on this patient. The smoking one, just hit the recall for the whole thing. It'll answer all those mandatory questions. Body system at the query, body system at the query. None of these have an answer. I don't need to recall anything. Now I can hit save. I should have everything in there. I did. I'm going to refresh my EMR. I'm going to go into my patient care history tab, and on my all responses, it still shows the initial no, right? But now the next time the nurse goes in to recall it, it won't even recall that no in there because I cleaned it up when I was in there. So they're dismissed from this visit, they come back again. It will always show who, when, put the no in there. And it'll also show that I took the no out if I looked at the edit on it. But then the next time that Sandy wants to recall the information, she doesn't have to worry about those no's being in there, right? But then when you look at the positives, this is the main thing. We're going to look at the positives. We're going to see what, for each body system, which was answered yes, review that with the patient, ask them if there's any changes or updates. And if there's no updates, open it up, recall everything and save it, and you're done. The first time takes a long time. The second time, faster than what we do now, much faster. So we have this handout, past medical history, and I just want to review this. But the history, number one says the history is broken down into separate sections for patients' personal history and the family history, right? Each history category starts with a question for if there's a history for that body system. Is there a history of respiratory, ENT, cardiac problems? Yes, no, and able to assess. This is a mandatory query. It has to be answered for each category on the list. After that, if the answer to the category is yes, the other questions become available, right? We saw that, how it opens it up. For these queries, only document the positives as a yes. Never document the negatives. The no is only used if the patient's kind of iffy on the history. So you might select no or yes, but then you would follow it up by adding a comment. Do you have a history of angina? No, not really, but I keep having this weird heartburn that radiates into my left shoulder, but I know it's not my heart. I have a strong heart, always have. Okay, so he denies having history of angina, so no, right? However, I'm going to put a comment in there that says, whoop, let me get in here and I'll open it up and demonstrate this. But I'm going to put a comment in there that says, describes symptoms of angina but denies diagnosis or something like that, right? So that would be a rare instance where you would actually document a no. So I'm going to go into my PMH and I'm just going to leave it nice and new and not recall it. We're going to pretend like this is my new one on my new patient. I'm going to go to cardiac, and in order to get that to come up, I have to say yes, they do have a cardiac history. I'm going to go to angina and I'm going to say no. Describes chest pain as indigestion, but radiates to left jaw or something. When I say that, we'll see it as a no under all responses, but it's kind of a flag to somebody that says, oh, let's keep an eye on this. The physician will see that, they'll be aware. This is a communication tool now. I'm going to save it. Oh crap, I gotta go in and, well, I'm going to get out of this without saving it, but you get the gist of it that way. Unless you want me to, I can demonstrate how it shows in that history tab.
Will it save if you don't just fill in, there's no yeses and no nos? Will it save?
Will it save a comment? It'll just save a comment. But it doesn't know if I'm
It
charting.
won't come out and say you're not finished, or whatever it says.
It'll only say I'm not finished because I didn't document the questions that have an asterisk by them. But angina doesn't have an asterisk by it, and so I don't have to document yes or no. However, it is not, the comment will still show, but the patient's actually denying it, so I need to say that no history, because the patient is denying this. So the true statement would be, no, I don't have a history, but here's my comment.
So the ones with the asterisks has to have a yes or a no.
Or unable to assess.
Okay.
Yep,
But
so
the others don't.
on all these body systems, there's one mandatory question for each system. Yes, no, unable to assess. If I answer no, no pop-up box. If I answer unable to assess, no pop-up box. If I answer yes, bam, it opens up. And only the yeses. Unless, they're in denial or something, there will be an instance. But if you're making a comment on there, then you should still, you need to answer a yes or no, because either the patient says it's a history or they say it's not a history, one way or the other. So you're still putting a yes, no, and typing your comment. I'm going to not save that. And then when I look on the positives, it only shows the yeses. So if I charted no history, but here's my comment, like no history, it would be under cardiac, it would say that angina no describes radiating pain to jaw, calls it indigestion, would show here. And the problem is if somebody goes in and keeps charting no, 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 no all the time, that little comment that's so important that we monitor gets lost in all of those other no's. So we have to be responsible users in this assessment and not push no if it's not necessary. Every once in a while you might have a flick of the wrist, you know what I mean? And so you just want to be careful. Sometimes we're going to get some accidental no's in there, but it won't be 3,000 and it'll make it much easier to read the document. So that way when I have the no chest pain, it'll show up. It won't get lost among everything else. It's not a perfect system. I've spent, when did we start this? August, that we started working on this solution for past medical history because it's so extensive and this is what Meditech recommends. And I'm like, Meditech, you're crazy. I'm not doing it. I can't find a way around it that the Meditech system will still work for the functions that we need to accomplish with it. So unfortunately, this is the software that we have. This is the worst thing about the software. Everything else is dandy. But I want to point out to you that the second time, you get to reap the benefits of the nurse that did this the first time, because all you have to do is recall and update. So it is faster the second time. A lot faster.
And once the clinic goes up,
Yeah, we're working on the integration with the clinic. What's the clinic module, once it goes up, for them to come in and document via PCS, Meditech isn't even sure how that they have a way of documenting history, we have a way of documenting history, and in the next 2 years, they'll talk. But we're still working on that past medical history talking with the clinic. So I hope that it can, but I don't
that's
know.
one of the big sell points.
Well, that's amazing, because the salesman lied about a few other things, but down the road, yes. So the deal with the clinic is the clinic isn't technically Meditech, it's called LSS and not MT. LSS and Meditech were created by two best friends. One's an MIT grad and the other's a Harvard grad. They get together, they build this great software, but they have two different companies because they don't want to share. Then LSS is now merging with Meditech. They bought him a couple years ago, bought him out. And so Meditech has to do some reprogramming with LSS to get it to integrate with everything. So they're working very hard to get that up to speed. But it might not be there right away. And down the road it will. So that's why I say I'm hopeful that we can use the
So
clinic's history.
Meditech didn't have the kind of program to use for clinic. I mean, their program
they
is
don't.
totally different, that it does not have
Yeah.
the access to like this medical record thing.
Home meds?
Home meds, I'm told it does, but we have to test it out. But Meditech assures me that the home meds routine can be done in the clinic. So to me, they're looking into the past medical history. To me, if meds can be done, then it won't be long before past medical could also be done. So, and a clinic setting is a better setting anyway because it's not so urgent. You don't have somebody requiring oxygen or EKGs on the floor. You know, you're admitted to the hospital because you're sick. If you weren't so sick, we'd have you in the clinic, right? You're in the ER because you're very ill. So in the ER, how's that going to work? This is very time consuming. Well, I'm going to write down my little notes on my little alcohol wipe, and I'm going to do the documentation after I get the patient stabilized and either sent to the floor or sent down the road. Because in the ER, we have like a 2-hour time frame that we need to get that patient addressed, fixed, and out of our ER. That's our goal. And this might take 2 hours alone. So it's going to be documentation after the fact for
But
the ER.
this right here, this admission thing, that's just for inpatient.
The past medical history
Yeah.
or the admission assessment.
Well, what we're working on
Right
right now
now.
is it has medical, isn't it?
It's for inpatients, it's for ER patients, it's for surgery patients.
So every patient that comes in here has to have this past medical history
It's a
done.
hospital assessment.
So it's not like you say, you're not gonna get this kind of stuff. It's gonna be mostly no's or unable to
Or
assess.
unable to assess. Yep, until you have a really good opportunity to sit down with the patient or the family's there. There's all kinds of circumstances that would come up. But we were able to document our care because we were unable to assess. So we're doing our best to update the patient's medical records so that if they were to come in a diabetic coma and we didn't realize they were diabetic, you know, it's a patient safety issue, that we can document those things. But we can also cover our butts and say we weren't able to assess. We can add a note to it and we can say patient was unconscious, no family available. That's all there is to it, right? The clinic, I really hope we get that worked out because the clinic's the best setting to do a document like this.
Yeah.
But we need to know how to use it in the front lines too, so.
And then you get a patient that absolutely don't want answering the questions, so you say unable to assess.
Unable to assess.
I'm gonna tell them
No
not.
way.
I'm gonna tell them all to not answer questions.
And you put the reason in there for
Mhm.
patient D, patient refuses to
Yeah. Patient.
provide medical history.
No way.
Yeah.
My
For sure.
enthusiasm for the program has dropped.
Does anybody need a break? Okay.
3 hours later after.
You want
do it
those
after the
papers to
fact.
go with them. I mean, you fax them,
It's-
you have no idea where they're going.
Are you gonna have time to do this in the middle of a transfer?
No, that's what I'm
No.
saying.
So you just have to do verbal communication or do a handwritten nurse's note or something like that. You know, history of, put it on a nurse's note, send it down the road, and then we put it in the electronic record later. Because there's just no way that we can expect to do this. Like our ER scheduled, sometimes they're really busy, you know, and it might be a nice controlled situation if we didn't have a busy ER and we have one ER scheduled that's never had a PMH documented, that we can sit down with them and spend some time with them. But when you have 6 or 7 coming in at the same time, you're not going to be able to document a PMH on every one. Maybe you can jot down a little bit of history, you can get as much as you can in there. The next time they come in, we can expand on it, you know?
Well, regular ERs,
The
yeah,
ER
but
is
I'm
busy.
thinking about the transfers, the
Yeah, you're not going to get this
heart
done.
attacks you went out of there within the hour, and
Yep.
there's no way.
Exactly, that's what I mean. You just have to try and get it done after the fact. You know, you're taking care of your patient on your paper form right now because you're by hand documenting their medical history. I mean, you're saying, you know, you check the
Yeah,
boxes.
but I can just copy that and send with them, and I'm done.
Exactly. You can copy it and send it. So you have to put it on a nurse's note, copy it and send it, rather than wasting your time on the computer rather than taking care of your MI patient, because you should be nursing the patient, not the computer. So don't even open this on a transfer. Wait until after the fact. Document it later. Document what you can, put it on a paper note, copy it and send it with the patient. But the nice thing about the transfer, which you'll see from the ER module, and you'll also see when we talk about the discharge routine for the floor, is there's a report that you can just, all this documentation that we're doing, the last vital signs, the allergies, the home meds, the active meds, the things on the MAR that were given last, one click of a button, and you can print a transfer report, and you can print 2 copies. You can send one with Midwest, one to the hospital. All you have to do is maybe copy off a EKG that's not in the electronic system, make a copy of the EKGs. You've got your transfer form done with one click. And so to have to write down the medical history and make a copy of that along with the EKG isn't the daunting task like what we do now for a transfer packet. Because what we do now is hurry up and copy everything and get the labs. We scramble. It's going to be an automatic push of a button in Meditech. So there's benefits to that. And then you can send the past medical history as a nurse's note. Anything that is important to the care. You can give it verbal report on the phone to the nurse that you're transferring off to, because we all call ahead and give a report. Hey, just wanted you to know there's a history of a stent 2 months ago. There you go. If that's the only history, maybe it's the only history you have.
When we go live, are we still gonna have access then to the clinic visits and stuff like that?
You know, I've been
'Cause
asking
that's
that
where we
too,
get
where we
all
get
the
a lot of
history
that
and
information. Somehow they're archiving their documents from the clinic and like what we have now on paper, and they're getting it into the Meditech system somehow, but I don't have any training on it yet. So it'll be interesting to see how that process develops. But it's still very much under construction, and so it might be a little while before we know how to access those old records yet. But we'll be trained on it. We'll have to be, because we need to access.
Are we gonna be able to do that when we go live though?
Yeah, you have to access old information when you're live. I just don't know how. If they're gonna have a paper chart, if they're gonna have it archived electronically that you just click on it somewhere in here. It'll be there, I just don't know where. If we use the same system now. I know they're working on a new system for the future. If we use the old system June 1st or the new system, I don't know. That would be HIM, and I thankfully have nothing to do with that, because can you imagine all of those documents to move over to a new system? Oh, this makes me throw up in my mouth a little bit to think about it.
Or is there
Maybe that's
plans for
the
new
pizza.
computers and everything, so everything's faster, or what?
Yes. So new servers, and so once we're off of Healthland, Mike has purchased like these servers that were like $250,000, and they're much faster in processing. And maybe you've noticed a little bit that your Healthland has been a little faster, but it's been a little faster. But then with all the Meditech building going on, we're bogging down those super fast new servers with all of this Meditech information and Healthland at the same time. So then when we stop using Healthland, it'll be faster with Meditech. That's how Mike explained it to me. But right now the server's doing double duty. So it is technically, what their reports and stuff, it is a little bit faster than what it was. But then it'll be even faster once we push Healthland off of those servers. Or so I'm told. I'm thinking positive thoughts about that. There's still some like dead zones though. I heard that with some of the cows that we have now on the floor, the room 202, you go in there and it just
rooms.
kicks you off. The OB rooms do.
Oh, is it one?
And it's something, I was talking to Kelly Peets about it because it's been an ongoing issue, and she said with these new laptops that they're getting in, they've tested out a couple of them, and so far those dead zones aren't happening on the new computers, which is very encouraging. So if that continues to happen and we have those dead zones, I don't think they'll have any choice but to put a computer in those rooms, because you have to have a computer at the bedside to do your meds, and if you don't, then it's not going to work. They'd have to put a computer on the wall in there, which not everybody's a fan of. I prefer computers on wheels versus a computer in every room, but some people prefer a computer in every room. And that wasn't my decision to make, but in that case, the computer on wheels isn't working, so you've got to have something that's hardwired in. You can't just be working off of the remote network. So back to past medical history. On that number 3, we were talking about the no. If it's kind of iffy, choose yes or no, but follow it up by adding a comment, then this would be a rare instance. The sentence after that, the only other time is how it starts. Cross out that entire sentence. It starts with the only other time and it ends with why the change was made. So we're crossing that off because since I started teaching this, I made this outline 2 weeks ago and then started teaching this on Monday, and in that time frame, Meditech fixed a bug and you can actually unclick the yes or no. Because before, when you clicked a no, the only way to get it off of there was to click the yes, but now you can actually click back on the no and uncheck it. So go ahead and cross that all the way off. All you have to do is unclick the yes or unclick the no. You should never chart a no without entering a comment. But it's logical you could chart a yes without entering a comment, right? So then on number 4, I've listed out the history categories. I'm just going to pull this up again. And that's in the order that they appear on the screen. It's actually been condensed down to just ear, nose, and throat, but it does include some stuff about the head and eyes. So it's just ENT instead of HEENT. Small technicality. Notice on genitourinary that there's prostate history, but prostate history isn't a mandatory query. Well, obviously females might not have any prostate history, and we would always have to chart unable to assess. So if it's a male, when we click on the genitourinary, yes, no, unable to assess, if you click on no, it could be, implicit that there's no prostate history if there's no genitourinary history. But it's just an extra reminder to assess if there's any prostate history, and then you could click no here again. Or maybe they say, well, no, I don't have any urine problems, but I do have a prostate problem. They're not medical people all the time, so they might not know the connection there. It's all connected, man, but they might not know. The reproductive history, there's a mandatory query for whether they're male or female for yes, no, and unable to assess. I'm going to go ahead and click yes so I can just show you some of the things that appear in here that apply to both sexes. Birth control applies to both sexes. Maybe it's just a spermicide use, maybe it's a condom, maybe it's a birth control pill, which they now make for men, so there's all these different things. Breast surgery, it could happen. Dyspareunia, don't remember what that means. It would be nice maybe with some of this stuff that we don't have to spend so much time Googling when we're filling it out. So the things that aren't common, we're going to put in a little text in here that describes what the hell that is. What is dyspareunia? Does anybody know?
I've heard
I don't
it before,
remember.
but I can't remember what it was.
Yeah, you're like an encyclopedia. I thought you might know, but well, most people know what gonorrhea is. Most people know what hermaphroditism is. But if there's something on here like you're like, what is this? I'm never going to remember this. Write it down, make a note of it, pass it on to a builder so that we can maybe put in some text.
Isn't that like painful period?
I think you're right. Yeah.
I think you're right.
And so,
If dyspareunia is painful periods, we need to take it off of the
we
both
all
sexes.
have it.
We all have it.
Oh, no,
Males-
I don't anymore.
Well,
I
it
forgot.
could-
I got rid of
Lucky
mine.
you. Maybe the males have sympathy pains. Painful periods, once a month. Ask my wife.
Yeah,
We might
they
need to
suffer
move
too. Honey, did you take your pills today?
that. It's a team effort sometimes. Yeah.
It's painful sexual intercourse
Painful sexual intercourse.
Okay,
due
there
to
we go.
medical or psychological causes.
I suppose it could be for both then. Could be for both. We'll leave it on there.
Man or woman, yes.
Painful, okay, well, we'll be sure to get a comment on there so we don't have to Google it every time. If you did want to
Especially
Google
if
it,
somebody has Peyronie's disease.
Peyronie's disease?
Peyronie's.
I don't know, you're like a medical encyclopedia, Sandy.
That's when your parents goes like
I don't remember. Okay. Men can have a mastectomy, men can have nipple discharge,
that.
so that kind of thing. Notice that there's a general STDs and then we have gonorrhea and syphilis actually listed out separately. Government regulation, they want us to actually list those, but we chose not to list the hundreds of other ones that are out there. Just STDs, yes, no, and make a comment. But if it is gonorrhea or syphilis, please include a yes for that separate from the STD.
So your sexual activity that may need it in nursing home, you could put yes and then put tricky.
You should, can you say that loud enough for the whole class to hear? So then I want you to notice that this is for both sexes, and then there's a male and a female. You have to click on the plus sign to get that to expand, whether they're male or female, okay? And then the male is kind of short form, all that stuff, and then the
So then if you
female,
have somebody that's got male and female both, then you can do both of them?
it would apply to both.
Okay.
Exactly. Which we could suppress this based on the sex of the patient upon admission, but if it's ambiguous or something and we've never had surgery, those things can happen. So they're both available. It would be a rare instance. I don't know if we've ever had a patient, but
That we know of.
yeah, but if we did, it would be here.
So why
Well, we
wouldn't
do-
prostate
yeah.
problems be under the male part instead of just out there?
With prostate problems,
Yeah, isn't that just
on that
right there?
genitourinary,
that prostate history? Why couldn't they just stick that under male?
under just the male part
Yeah.
of it. It really applies to both. I mean,
Okay.
it applies to urinary system and it applies to reproductive. But the problems with the prostate tend to, I would think they kind of tend to affect the urine system more than the reproductive system, but it kind of goes both ways there, so
Yeah.
it might be something.
Well, yeah, I know, but couldn't they
That's why
just
it's
stick
not-
it under like
Well,
a male
it
history?
is a reproductive organ. We don't have to get into.
I mean, you would, like
Well,
you were saying,
have
you
you
think
seen-
of it more as causing a problem with the urine.
Yeah, you do, you think of it that way. But, okay, I'm just gonna throw this out there, and not to be vulgar or anything, but some men who have impotency,
Yeah,
you
it's
can
because of the
stimulate the
pH.
prostate as a
Right.
sexual
Right.
treatment for that. So,
Yeah.
thanks. You know,
Plus, it's also
it's-
sitting out there because
anyway.
it's something you wanna make sure you address as well, I think, is why it's out.
I guess I didn't even think that it was like pertaining to the urinary because it's just hanging out right there.
Which
So
is
Yeah.
usually why you
Yeah.
end up having
Might-
problems with males.
I thought it was a category in itself. That's
Maybe
why
we
I
should
asked.
start asking the man, does your prostate pertain more to your urethra or to something different? If that's the case, we'll categorize it accordingly.
I'll let you ask
But-
that, Amy.
Let you ask that.
I'm okay.
So, I mean,
I don't want to know.
it's a matter of organization. We actually had a consultant organize this information for us, and they said that the general practice among hospitals in the U.S. is to include it in genitourinary.
It's
So,
fine. I was just wondering.
but I totally get what you're saying though, because it's kind of goes with male reproductive, females not so much. So it could reside in here someday. It does have its own entire list of questions that goes with it. Oh, it's supposed to. It does.
Like a slow acting.
No, actually, I think I did this on Monday and it never did work. I just wrote it down and I forgot to talk to Elise about it. Well, there's supposed to be some questions that pop up there. If it's just a yes or no, we can put it in reproductive early, or we can just leave it there. But it needs to have a comment. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
What's the prostate history? History of prostate, yes, what? Like BPH, resection, that stuff is all listed under there.
Mhm.
It exists, it's just for some reason I gotta do some fixing on that. So that's the male, here's the female. We don't do Tanner stages, so if you're wanting to document a Tanner stage, we have never done that in this facility and they don't want to do that in the future. So it's like they're, you start Tanner staging for pediatrics until they reach full maturity, which is late, early adult. Like if they have, they're in their reproductive development 8 years, they might have like some puffiness in the breast area. They might have some, their testes might drop a little bit more than what like it's like puberty stages, yeah. So it's those reproductive developments.
So on the prostate, where is the history part that goes with the prostate? you
Yeah,
said?
that's what I was just saying.
It
It's
doesn't
not
come up.
popping up right now, so we'll just have a little fixing to do on that.
Oh, okay.
Then endocrine, it's all listed out there. Cancer history, there's some things listed out there. Lolly made the good observation that cancer history wasn't part of the family history, which we would like to include that. However, I just wanted to also show that when you click on the reproductive thing on the family history, maybe it was somewhere else. I thought it was in here. Some of these cancer things are, here it is, under family history, family breast cancer, family cancer, and you could put yes, no, but just like in Monday the conversation was, I don't know about the days in between, but this really should have its own category. And if you look at the cancer history for the patient, you'll notice like lymphoma isn't on there, so we've got a few notes. But if you notice things like that that aren't on there that are common to our area that we see,
So
write
that-
it down so we can bring it to class and
So
take
like
it over
when
there.
you get that, or if you were to say yes on family cancer, would, and it's not one of the cancers listed there, or if it's, do you want to put father, mother,
Mhm.
you'd want to know who in the family had cancer. Like that.
Yeah, you totally could. But this, I mean, we want to revamp this a little bit. I mean, I think everybody's in agreement that we want to have an entire section to be able to document that. And when you're in here looking at these different body systems, some of these still have cancer written in the body system.
Oh, yeah.
Which we want to take that out and put it in the cancer section so that you don't have to search through the body system to find it. We'll put that into the cancer section. If you look at this section on cancers, it lists a lot of different things. And some of these are actually included in 2 places. Genitourinary cancer is here, and it's also kind of up in here. Where is it? Oh, maybe we already fixed that one. It was there on Monday. They must have already fixed it. So we're trying to get rid of it so it's like not 2 questions of the same thing on here. It just needs to be in one category. Moving from...
Of course, then I suppose they liked it because if you went to their certain body areas, when a doctor makes out his notes, it's usually by system.
By system.
And so then, I suppose that's where they put that in.
Yeah. But it makes it difficult to find it. And the doctor, you know, we're kind of like not even telling them this, I guess, in a way. Like, the PDOC, it'll have a cancer section in it because we have a cancer section here. And so it'll pull those things in. It might not, and it's just gonna have to be a little bit separate. Because it makes it very difficult to find these things when you're filling out the long version of it on the front lines when you're sitting there with the patient. So we'll see, you know, we gotta test it out. It might be a little bit of give and take, but we're hoping they'll like the way we set this up to separate it out.
And then your treatments and interventions. The psychosocial medical history, we're going to change this title to say history of psychosocial problems, because right now it just says psychiatric problems. And to me that delineates mental illness problems, where actually, yes, alcoholism is a disease and it's often categorized as a mental health illness, but it is actually a social medical history. And if it says psychiatric, you're like, no, but where do I chart the substance use? So we're going to change that title because the title was misleading. And then you have a lot of different disorders and issues listed here. Substance use, if you click yes, you need to comment what it is. There is actually,
There was alcohol under that.
as a sign and symptom, so the way it's categorized is like, this is the disorder, diseases and disorders, substance use disorder, and then the symptom of that might be alcohol use. So there's, here it is, so here's a few different ways, but you can also have alcohol use as a, maybe it's not diagnosed as a substance use disorder, but the patient says they have a chronic history of alcohol use, and they have a history of bipolar disorder, and they use it because it helps them to combat the stress they feel. So you have two areas where it's not a diagnosed, it's kind of like a dual diagnosis type of patient, but then you have actually two separate instances, and maybe it hasn't been diagnosed as true substance use or something like that. So caffeine use, definitely. Oh yeah.
Oh,
Even history of job loss, that kind of stuff. If the patient feels like this is impairing and affecting their medical care, it's here that you can choose to document on it. I don't think that some of these things would be documented on very often. But if you think that it's contributing to their medical history, then it's available here. Smoking and tobacco use is listed there, but this one is always opened up. It's never condensed, because we have to answer it for every patient that's 13 years of age and older. And sometimes you have to answer it for the young ones too, because they're maybe more open and they have been using tobacco from a younger age of 8 or 9 even. So it's available to document even if they're not 13 years of age. I think, is there secondhand smoke in this? I have a request that we can document secondhand smoke exposure, but that might be, it might not be done yet, it might be in respiratory.
maybe you put it under smoking risk factors, comment.
I thought that maybe it's just not done yet. Yeah, you could put a comment in there. But it was actually another query. I'll have to look into that. Birth and genetic history. It's kind of short and concise. There's not a comment on here, other than you can comment on the actual line. That might be something to add, because every other category has a comment. Infectious disease history, you would maybe think logically that STDs should go under infectious disease history. Should we put them under reproductive? Should we put them under infectious disease? Chicken or the egg, right? But there are some important questions at the top. Fever of unknown origin is a diagnosis, right? And it might be important to assess recent travel, recent acute infection that was resolved and maybe he's coming back again as sepsis, or possibly exposure to other family members, something like that. It kind of becomes important in history. However, recent travel, if you put yes, and you say, you know, 2012 Mexico, and save that, and they're not back in the hospital for 5 years, when you recall it, recent travel, yes, 2012 Mexico is always going to come up in there, until maybe they've gone somewhere else, then you could update it again.
Yeah,
2013.
Yeah.
Went to Grand Island. So, or
These cards.
Yeah.
went to Valentine, Nebraska for a little vacation. This time of year is getting to be nice to go down the river, so who knows what kind of diseases and disorders we can pick up from our own river streams, right? These days. But there's all kinds of things in here. This history to MRSA,
and history to VRE. If they are documented as yes, when you save it, and you click on this little I in the header bar, if there was a history, it would show in there. History MRSA, yes. And so that way, if you're ever wondering, oh, we've got this open wound, I don't wonder if they've ever had MRSA before, you can click on there. If there was a history documented, it's just one more place you could see it.
120 feet tall.
Yeah. The other, yeah, I must have been
Hey,
clearing that. If, the other place you can get it is in that patient care tab of the EMR under the history button, and it would show if there was a positive history for MRSA. But without having to sift through all of those positives, you can come to the header bar and look at that. We didn't include any other ones. Some of these we were Googling. KPC, didn't really know what that was. Audrey was like, I've heard of KFC, not KPC. Klebsiella pneumoniae, carbinoesterase or something, I don't know. I can't remember what the C meant, but it just meant that Kleb pneumonia. So obviously some of these should be spelled out and not abbreviated. This one was the, something about the,
Estimated cell
yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I think of too. But it's actually the beta-lactose resistant strain of staph. So the E, I can't remember what the E meant. But these things need to be spelled out, not abbreviated, which we're sensitive to that. We got a little fixing to do here. I requested, when I was going through this with the specialist, I'm like, what if they have something weird and we have to answer like 10 million questions, like they have Rocky Mountain spotted fever? So they added tick-borne disease in order to, then I would have to put in the comment what the tick-borne disease was. But they do have Lyme disease listed separately.
Visa and MasterCard.
Yeah, Visa and MasterCard. Yeah, past medical history of a heart attack related to Visa and MasterCard. Then other medical history, alternative medicine use. On the comment, you only get 75 characters. So if it's extensive, there is a place where we chart their medications, including supplements and herbals. But you could include an add note, and you could type it in there. And you would just, if you add a note on here, because you don't have enough room in the comment section, you're still going to use the nursing note. And then you'll do like history, alternative med use, and then you'll type your comment in after that, so that it'll be aware. Because if you just start typing in, nobody knows which item you're wanting to elaborate on, right? There's history of malignant hyperthermia here in this other, and there's also family history of anesthesia reaction here. History of surgeries, organ transplant, history of surgeries, yes, no comment, and you would type them into the comment box basically. That for some people could get pretty extensive, so again you do add note, nursing note, history, surgeries, continued, blah 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 blah. History sucks. I mean, it's kind of long, but we want to make the family medical history categories match the personal history categories, so that once you know, you kind of get used to how those categories look and flow, right? And then you can easily find it in the family category, so that you don't, because right now they look very different. The ears, nose, and throat is very different from what's listed above. It's much shorter actually, which I'm not going to complain that it's shorter, but it's difficult to find the family history of what? Nearsightedness isn't on here, so where would I document it? So this really should match the personal history category, and most people might agree with that. It is going to make family history a little more lengthier when we expand it, but it will actually make it easier to find and easier to document. So just remember that the family history starts expanded. There's no mandatory queries to answer there. It's a work in process, it's long, but remember the benefit that one time it's long and from there on it's faster. And I'm sorry, we did everything we could to change this. This is the worst part. It really is. Everything else about Meditech is way better than what we do now. That is PMH. Do you remember where to view everything that I charted? So I've charted it and now I just want to view it, or I have a patient that's been here before since June 1st of 2013, so I know they should have a PMH in the system. So I can go to patient care, the history tab, and view the positives. And this is their history. And if I'm curious if they had any IFEs or any unables, I can look in the all responses. So we would review both of those, really. Review this with the patient, see if anything needs revisited. Go into your work list, document your PMH. If they've been here before, recall, save. Unless if there's something to update, recall, update, save. I'm going to go ahead and put my past medical history in here. On the number 5, I just spelled out the process that we've talked about. So it's listed there on what to do when it's time to chart those things. So I would just suggest getting in there and practicing with it. We're going to go over some of the OB documents that we have in the system, just because maybe some of you are OB nurses, some of you aren't, but we all, as nurses, have the opportunity or the potential opportunity that we will take care of a delivery patient. For me, it's very anxiety producing, but I'll do my best not to, but we should at least have seen the forms and kind of know how they work. So on the work list, we're going to click the Add Footer button. We're going to go to the interventions, to any word, and type in OB, and hit enter. So first step is to go to the work list. The second...
Still on this care item. How do I get out of this? This
Is that the care item? That is your work list.
Alright, that is my work.
That's, yep, the care items, that's your work list.
Okay.
Yay, well that was an easy step. So step 2 is to click the Add Footer button.
Oh,
Yep. Step 3 will be to make sure that you're on the interventions. And then step 4 will be to click on any word search and type in OB and hit enter. So from here you can see all these interventions that we have available for an OB patient. For the most part, those documents should all start with the word OB so that they're easy to find, and they're easy to find on the work list. So once you get some care plans on there, that work list gets a little longer. So the first thing we're going to do when an OB comes in, as long as they're not in like distressing labor, if that was the case, we'd go right into labor flow sheet, possibly even delivery summary if they're already, have already pushed it out. But we would click on the OB admission assessment. The next item that we would use on an OB in logical sequence we would use the labor flow sheet. So click on labor flow sheet. So everybody should have 2 things listed here: the OB admission assessment and the OB labor flow sheet. Are you on any word search?
Oh, you're on interventions.
Yep. You want to be on interventions.
Interventions and
And did you
Any word.
switch to any word?
I put OB,
OB.
and I got observe our team, why is that?
Try putting OB in caps. That might be. This computer's just not on your team today. There. Okay, so your OB, thank you. Now we know. OB has to be in caps. I didn't tell you that.
I didn't put mine in the
Did it start with like observe, observe, observe?
No.
It didn't?
No.
That's weird. Maybe the next time you go in to do that, it won't work. But if it does that and it keeps doing that to you, if you get in practice and test it out a few times, let me know.
Mine's not going to be.
Yours is in little letters? When you hit OB, did you hit enter? After you put that lowercase Huh.
I wonder if she accidentally had a space in there.
No, she didn't have a space because she had the word observe, 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 observe.
Yeah.
It was just the computer gods aren't smiling on you today, Sandy.
They aren't.
No.
You're supposed to be able to write or something.
They're on the rising.
Should be able
That's
to-
good. You'll get that out of your way today, and you'll be good to go from the everyday forward. Right? It'll be somebody else's turn to fight with those people tomorrow. So, go ahead and click on the OB admission assessment, and you'll see it cues it up over here. Click on the OB labor flow sheet. It queued it up, so now you have 2 things listed here. Do you have 2 things, Sandy? Admission assessment and labor flow?
Okay.
Okay, so the next thing would be the OB delivery summary. That seems logical. You labor and then you have a nice delivery. And then it would be logical for this OB patient that we would be doing maybe a postpartum assessment. I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate the epidural cath assessment. And then this OB outpatient labor assessment, go ahead and add that in there. We would only do that for like the non-stress tests, the OBs that come to the ER, those kind of things that are fetal monitoring. So we should have 6 things listed here, 6 selected items. Go ahead and click Save. It's going to add these things to our work list. We can alphabetize our work list by clicking on this care item. And I'm going to do mine in reverse alphabetic order so that it brings the OBs right up here. And it's nice that they all start with OB because it's all in the same little area. So the first thing we're going to go into is the OB admission assessment. Go ahead and put a check in the box for now and hit Document. So, for the most part, when we do an OB admission assessment, the primary nurse is the one doing it. Every once in a while, maybe the CNA might do an inventory or something, but really for the most part, the primary OB nurse is called in and is getting them set up and all of that stuff. Or maybe they're not called in yet, but we knew they were coming, so we're prepared. It's most of the time. So we start filling this out. And what the OB nurses have asked for is that the home med verification question, the allergies verified question, and the vaccinations verified question are at the top. So it reminds you to do these things. Since they're mandatory queries, if you go in and fill out all this other stuff, and then you get to the last one and it's like, did you verify the allergies? And you're like, oh, now I gotta go out and do that before I can save this. It's at the top, so it tells you, have you done this yet? If you haven't, we'll teach you how to do that next week, but that's why it's at the top of the list. It'll just remind you before you get into the meat and potatoes of this. This looks like just your general OB admission assessment. It looks a lot like what we have in Healthland, a little different because the round buttons, you can only pick one thing. So on my screen right now, when you see me clicking from rupture membranes to spontaneous to C-section, it deselects the previous and selects the new. The square ones for multiple choice mean you can pick one or many, or all, should you so decide. Sometimes it is all in those OB rooms. There's just, a lot of information here. What's the birth plan? Last food and drink. Smoking still has to happen on the OBs. 13 and over. Personal habits. They've asked specifically that this becomes part of the OB admission assessment separate from the past medical history because it does become pertinent to the birth, and they reflect on this later for this infant's assessment, so that's why it's here extra. We will end up answering that twice on this patient and the PMH and on here, but we also recognize that it's important to the care of the mother and baby. A lot of this stuff reflects the regular admission assessment. You got your Braden on here, you got a Morse ball, you got your labor and delivery social services screen, and then for convenience, we went ahead and included the height and weight and vital signs on the bottom of this form. It functions exactly the same as the regular vital signs would. It's just for the convenience of having it on here, so they don't have to click in another intervention. If they answer a blood pressure or a temperature in here, and then they go into the regular vital signs assessment and they hit recall, it'll recall what they entered here on the OB admission assessment into the vital signs assessment. So the queries talk back and forth. Doesn't matter where you answer the blood pressure query, wherever you hit recall, it'll pull in the last one. That's the admission assessment. We're just going to X out and not save it. Otherwise we have about 15 required queries to answer. Go ahead and uncheck your box on the admission assessment in the work list. And we're going to go to the labor flow sheet. Put a check in the now box and push document. So this is what your labor flow sheet looks like. Notice that it defaults in flow sheet mode. We know we're in flow sheet mode because you have drop-down boxes for all of your multiple choice items, which makes sense when it's called a flow sheet. But the first time you answer the labor flow sheet, it's very handy to switch it over to questionnaire mode. And you do that by using the mode footer button, and then when you push it, you're in questionnaire mode and all of these little multiple choice shows up. Go in, answer your assessment, save it. That's your first labor assessment. Now I'm ready to go in and answer it again. My document defaults me in flow sheet mode. And my, oh, I picked a previous one. Let me get out of this real quick. I was not where I need to be. Here we go. So the previous one that I did shows up first, and now I'm charting, and sometimes you do chart a labor flow sheet every 1 minute, every 5 minutes. It can be pretty frequent. I can go in, there's no changes in here. Oh, well, I'm just going to recall. Boom, recall the whole thing. And I did that by pushing the recall footer button, and I clicked on the diamond by this check mark labor flow sheet, recalled everything. The vitals that I did the last time on this patient, even though I didn't document on the flow sheet here, pulled in when I hit recall. I can update, I can say, oh man, they're moving along, now their pain's a 4, edited that, now I'm saving it. I'm going to get rid of some of my not done's because they're interfering with my desktop, so I'm clicking on those real quick. There we go. On my now column, I'm going back in 5 minutes later. Doctor checked the patient. Other than that, no other changes. So I'm just going to recall and hit everything. Oh, well, I didn't do vitals, so I'm just going to delete it this time. And then chart in here somewhere. There's a place for my progress notes. Doctor checked. Cervix not dilated or something, you know. Save it. So you see that every time I go into my labor flow sheet, it shows me the previous data, shows me the progression of my labor. I'm going to go ahead and recall and save again. And I'm doing this so I can demonstrate something for you. 5 minutes later, we're really progressing. See how I can show 5 at a time on here? Recall. Oh boy, now we're at a 4, we're at a 5 in pain. Things are moving along. Somebody better call Tom. Why don't we do that? We should call Tom. He needs to come do this epidural. So now Tom's here doing the epidural. We can go into our labor assessment. Notice how I have a scroll bar now. I can see the first one I documented, and I can also see the last one that I'm documenting now. So I can always see that initial pain level, that initial tolerance, those initial vital signs, and I can see the most recent one too, just by scrolling. So this really works for a nice flow sheet for a labor patient. You just go in, you document what you need to do, you save it. When the next opportunity comes that you need to document, hit it. Automatically, that's all right there for you to view. All you got to do is click to see the previous ones. Any questions about the labor flow sheet? It's pretty standard data. It's kind of like that green paper fold-out record that they have now. It's only been made electronic. This is nice at the bottom, the OB labor flow sheet progress note. This is unlimited text. No limit to how much you can type in there. It's not limited to one line, 75 characters. You can just type to your little heart's content. If there's more information to show in here, you don't see this end, it would continue and you'd know that you need to just arrow down to view the rest of the note, or arrow up. But at the end of the note, it'll always show end. And with that text box, not too often would you have to go into the add note routine, which in an intense labor situation might be an inconvenience to have to do that. So it's nice to have that text box. So we've labored and labored, now we're going to deliver. So we're going to put a check box in our delivery summary. Delivery summaries are generally post-fact documentation because that room is cooking at a delivery. So baby nurse took the baby, mommy nurse is charting the OB delivery summary and making sure mommy is stable, doing our routine vitals as ordered. But this delivery summary includes risk factors of the pregnancy, information about the delivery, and then it also lists information about the babies that were delivered. And this does need to be part of the mother's history and the baby's history. The reason is sometimes mom and baby don't end up together. Maybe it was an adoption plan. So the mother's medical history will show that maybe she had a baby that was stillborn, or maybe she had a baby with a low APGAR for some reason. And also that baby's history with maybe the adoptive family, say, or something like that might be a happy ending. The baby's history would also show that the baby had a low APGAR or something like that, or was given oxygen at birth, which becomes important to the infant's medical history later in life. So that's why we chart baby information on the mommy's chart. Do you notice on the neonate delivery it says new birth order, add a birth order? That means click here, and it's infant A, B, C, and D. If you have multiple, like twins or triplets or something like that, they always give them a letter as their order. That's the standard of practice in OB. So if it's just one, then it's always infant A. If you have more than one, then you come down here, new birth order, and now you have infant A and infant B. Okay? Firstborn, secondborn. You can talk all about their cord vessels, their ID bands, delivery positions. Now when you come down here to the APGAR section, when you click on new APGAR interval, you select which infant you're talking about. For us, it's 9 times out of 10, we're just going to have infant A. We never really have twins on purpose here, right? So it would be pretty much an emergency. But infant A at 1 minute, this is their APGAR. Click on new APGAR interval, that's right below that. Now we are on infant A, 5 minutes. And then we are going to document the infant A 10-minute. So we have our APGARs on there for infant A. If we had an infant B, now we can go through infant B, 1, 5, and 10, and get those documented too. Here's the placenta information. It's pretty straightforward. Comment box with no limited spaces. And then here's this fetal monitor paper. Add a paper section number. So I know I need to click on the paper section number. And we have numbers 1 through 10. It's pretty common for an OB that you might have 5 sections of OB paper that you've been, the reams of paper that we do on the monitors. Not too often will you have more than 10, so that's why it only goes up to 10. So section number 1, here's the paper number, when it started. This is that sticker that we put on. We still have to put the sticker on there, but we used to chart that on paper, and now we can chart it electronically so that those things match. And then we click on new paper section, section 2, and we do that for all 5 sections that we used. Any questions about this delivery summary? 4 sections. Kind of average labor, wouldn't it be? Just save it. Oh, I didn't really document anything other than that instance. So that's our delivery summary. So we've admitted the patient, labored, had a delivery. Now we're postpartum. So we're going to click on the OB postpartum assessment. And I can organize these so it comes to the top of my screen. It might be easier for you to see it. Postpartum, click document. This is an example of also what our physical assessments will be like, where in our facility, it's already in our policies that we document by exception. So when you're in Healthland documenting right now, you have to document your first assessment every shift, and then you know how you can do no changes, and it gives you that red arrow, that it just arrows over no changes, no changes, no changes. So the postpartum assessment, if it's within normal limits and you select yes, this is everything you're agreeing to. And this is pretty much the same information that's in Healthland for those within normal limits values. So because I'm saying it's within normal limits, I don't have to chart anything in here unless I want to. Like if I want to capture a more accurate picture than what I feel is represented here. Fundus is firm below you. Well, I really like to say that it's 1 below you to be more specific. But technically by our guidelines, if you hit within normal limits, yes, you don't have to put anything else in here. The first time that you fill this out,
Sorry.
I would really,
It's okay.
I would highly recommend, I would advise that you fill this out in its entirety as what's appropriate to the patient and not just necessarily select within normal limits, because it does give a more accurate picture of the patient's condition. But our policy does allow you to just hit within normal limits. And then everyone after that you do, you could just recall and adjust the information. If I hit within normal limits and I save my postpartum that I was 1 below you, as in umbilicus, then I'm going to go back into my postpartum and it's my next 15-minute check like we do. And I hit recall. If I hit this recall button, it recalls the whole thing. So then I'm saying, yep, so this is 1 minute later. Yep, still within normal limits. I still agree that I'm at, 1 above. Oh, I said 1 below. Here, actually, no, we're not 1 above anymore. We're 1 below. And then you can make notes here. Maternal-child bonding is something new that we're doing, and it's a best practices. Taking in, taking hold, and letting go are stages of the bonding that a woman can vacillate between with fluctuations in hormone levels and how everything happens in that primary period of 72 hours after birth. We know that there's a lot of changes. So at 1 minute they might be just kind of taking it all in, and then they might kind of push away and withdraw a little bit. If we're seeing a lot of that letting go, then we need to try and promote some bonding opportunities. It could be something that we're interfering too much medically. We need to get some skin-to-skin contact, those kind of things. It can be emotional, it can be psychosocial issues, so it's a new best practices information. And then this Bromwich scale is new, and we only use that if we had an epidural, but it's a safety thing in the post-delivery and postpartum period, that you can't really get them out of bed until they're able to stand, and we're monitoring that, okay, so. This would be what our Bromwich scale assessment shows. And if it's completely blocked still, then obviously we're not getting them out of bed, right? They need to be free movement of legs and feet. If they're only able to flex the knees, then we don't even have enough hip flexion yet to safely ambulate. So that is the postpartum. Now, since Tom came and he made this the most comfortable delivery this woman's ever felt, we didn't have to have all of this horrible, painful experience or whatever. Not that I'm advocating for epidurals. I don't have children. I don't know that I would want to, but have an epidural because I'm scared to death of needles. So I don't know which would be the worst horror for me. So, but I'm just using it as an example so that we can go to this next phase of the delivery charting, which would be the OB postpartum epidural cath assessment removal. I'm going to go ahead and move it to the top of my screen so that everybody can maybe see it. OB postpartum epidural cath. So sometimes Tom's there and he's like, I'm going to leave that cath in for a little while, maybe an hour. After an hour, I'm here, I'm on call for you, and I'm going to leave in an hour if I don't hear from you, and then you can go ahead and take that out. Sometimes I'll do that. So you put check in the box,
You document on the fact that it's in place. You can say this is the status of the puncture site, the dressing, that everything's intact, and we're just good to go. And we're going to leave it in. And then you might be able to save that. And then after an hour, you phoned Tom. So you come in here, you assess the site, you talk about the removal, and you would just maybe add a note in here, a nursing note that, you know, anesthesia provider gave order per chart to DC cath or something like that, right? Save it. So now you have your note on here, and we're going to remove the catheter, and this is where you can document that you've removed it. Sterile conditions when you remove an epidural catheter. Save your assessment. Epidural cath is documented. That's basically our inpatient labor routine. This OB postpartum assessment that we looked at, we're going to include that traditional adult physical assessment like lungs and heart sounds and edema as part of that. But for demonstration purposes, for now it's just easier to pull up that one section so it's not so long to review. The outpatient labor assessment, we're still tweaking a few things in there. But with a couple of the OB physicians and OB nurses, and this is a consideration that's being done to use in the ER, and also for patients that maybe present to the ER, but we take them back to the labor rooms, and we are assessing, like maybe we receive an order that we're going to admit them for non-stress test or short-term monitoring. We could use this type of a form. We put a little history on here. We're doing some fetal assessment with those heart tones that we're listening to, looking at the uterine activity. If we do a cervical exam, which we usually don't do, the physicians do it, but we could document on here. I feel like we need a comment like physician states this cervical assessment, because not too often in our facility do we do these as the nurse. DTRs, here's some more uterine information, pain. And then we need to have, like our monitor mode is on here, and we can document the frequencies and everything. But we need to include that section for the paper sections with the numbers on them and everything. That needs to be part of this assessment. So it's still a little bit in progress, but if you notice something on here that you might be charting now that might not be available, write down your comments. We're perfecting this system so that when we go live in June, we have a lot of these big bumps and big wrinkles kind of ironed out. But it's a group effort. So that's the OB documentation. Any questions? Do you guys need a break? Get up and stretch? Or are you just trying to push through so you can get out in the sunshine a little earlier?
Yep.
Is that what you're up to? There's some more pizza. Tasha left over pizza for you.
Almost 2 is time.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna push through. In your work list, is everybody on the work list? Go to the Add Footer button and click on the Standards of Care. So just to review our standards of care, we have some inpatient type standards, and then we also have some outpatient type standards, such as maybe an outpatient scheduled floor that might just be receiving IV fluids or IVIG, a blood transfusion, Remicade. There's page 2. If you hit the next button at the bottom, Rituxan is there also. So when you expand this standard of care, you'll notice that these outpatient standards of care now include doing a head-to-toe physical assessment, which we don't do now on those written forms. Maybe you just make a few notes that you assessed that the lungs were clear, but really it does become important to document these things uniformly. And so on a blood transfusion patient, we know that we're assessing lung sounds, but we're not always having to document that. And it's a safety issue, especially in receiving high amounts of IV intake. We need to be documenting heart sounds, lung sounds, that kind of thing. So that's why you're going to see those physical assessments on there. Past medical history we do for everybody. Patient education as needed.
Generally, they're gonna get an IV. And then this last one says scheduled patient flow sheet. So we can add this standard of care for Rituxan to our patient. Multiple interventions, we're just gonna say no, we're not gonna resolve them right now. And then on your list, find that scheduled patient flow sheet. Go ahead and click on it, go into document. And this is where you can kind of do the play-by-play of what's going on with your patient. And it's pretty generic. It's really just a nurse's notes, but without having to do the standalone write note routine. So you can still view the play-by-play kind of in flow sheet mode and see what's been going on, but you can free text in here. And the reason for this being quite generic right now, and we might be tweaking it or adding if you have some suggestions, that's always open for discussion. But you have very different interventions for blood transfusion versus Remicade versus IV fluids. I mean, the care for those patients, your vital sign frequencies might be a little different, that kind of thing. So it's just a general place to chart. And then you also have that physical assessment. And then most of these interventions that we're doing are related to medications, right? So most of our charting is going to be on the MAR or on something that's called the TAR. Does anybody remember what that TAR means? Transfusion administration record. Yep. And from there, like on a blood patient, you might have just a general note to put in that scheduled floor patient note. You might have some physical assessment data to chart. But from the TAR, you can chart when you're hanging the blood, the patient's tolerance of the transfusion, if they have any reactions, their scheduled vital signs. All of that happens in the TAR. For patients like on Remicade and that kind of thing, those assessments would be happening from the MAR for some of that stuff. So the standards of care for a scheduled floor patient generally are generic because we specialize it based on the medication that we're giving them. So if you had questions about that, those are just some of the questions other students have had. So based on what we've seen on some of these common documentation routines, is there something you'd like to see more of? Got a lot of stuff on here. We have the easiest way is to go to the add button and look at the standards of care, click on the I, and you can see some of these routines that we would possibly be doing. Infants. It's just really getting familiar with where to get them, where to find them, how to document on them. Get familiar with those main meat and potatoes documents that we do. The INO is under construction, so when you go in there, you're going to see a lot of stuff that's missing. So we're aware. Vital signs, if you have any suggestions on vital signs, let us know. Vital signs right now is pretty much a completed document, but we can always be open for suggestions. Past medical history, it needs a little cleanup. If you have a suggestion to get rid of it, I apologize in advance. I'm not going to be able to do that as much as I would like to. The admission assessment adult, we want to separate some of that stuff out so that we can share it with CNAs and nurses instead of CNAs not even being able to document it because they can't answer like the smoking history queries and that kind of thing. So we've had some really good things coming into light. So I really don't have a lot of other stuff to show you. The homework assignment in your downtime at work, I mean, is just to get familiar with this stuff. Get in there and play with these buttons. Get familiar with how to document something, how to recall and document something, how to edit something, and try and remember where you can view that in the patient's record. All those function buttons that we went through, the different screens. We tried to give you some good reference materials if you get lost. If you're practicing and you'll come up with a suggestion, write it down and bring it to class. It can be really good brainstorming for everybody because we might really think of some good solutions, or it might embark us on some other ideas. If I have 50 people emailing me with suggestions right now, I'm going to feel a little overwhelmed. So I also ask that you just bring it to class. But we need those brilliant ideas, because what we can get ironed out now before June, it's going to be so much better for everybody. And it's a group effort. It has to happen at the grassroots level. The people that are going to be using it need to inform how this needs to be done. So no question is bad. But if you're practicing and you get stuck, call, text, email. We don't want you to be stuck, spinning your wheels and not able to view and come up with suggestions and ideas. So that would be something you definitely need to email or call about.
Is the IV area still under construction, Jess?
Which one?
The IV area,
Um,
like starting an IV-ish, because this is,
is it, you know, the IV area,
IV initiate, there's one called IV initiation.
the interventions for it,
Uh-huh.
yeah,
IV
that's under
initiation, IV
construction.
therapy,
Yeah.
and IV site change.
Mm-hmm.
All three of those have automatically populated over on my work list here today.
Based on the standard of care,
Uh-huh.
I know. Yeah,
And they
the I-
don't all work.
yeah, the IV interventions are still,
They're still working on that.
yeah. Well, I actually, I thought it was done, but apparently it's still under construction because what you're telling me that you're seeing is not the way it's supposed to
Yeah.
be.
Yeah, because
So-
if it's one is under IV therapy, is that
Mhm.
gonna encompass starting and discontinuing IVs?
Exactly. It's very confusing.
And IV initiate.
I'm equally confused by that, but
Yeah,
we
I'm
just have,
very
yeah,
confused
we just have
still.
to, it's just meetings and conversations that
So who's taking care of that?
Kathy Horn is taking care of that.
Kathy Horn is taking
Yeah.
care of the IV
Yeah.
area.
It's been a work in progress.
Okay.
And it
So
just
she's
needs
the one
some
I'll
review.
talk to then?
Yeah.
Okay.
But as far as the interventions go, I thought that she went through and already set the ones active for what she thought we needed. So if you have some suggestions, I know she'd be open to that feedback. So, but that's another thing that you might want to write it down and like your core team, so talking to her and working with her on it is, you know, a different option because you can help her with the build. Yeah, schedule an appointment with her.
Mostly because I wanna make sure I have the right stuff attached to the
Exactly.
ER side of everything. Because
Exactly.
I have attached the IV stuff to,
I
well,
realize.
actually, they're attached to our order.
I have to run reports. This is kind of, I'm gonna lose you a little bit on this, so
And
just
it's
kind of
gonna
like,
be
this is information you don't need to know. You're not responsible for this. It's nothing you'll ever use it. I have to run reports on all of those queries and interventions for each item in there
Right.
to see where it's being used, and then I need to look on that spreadsheet for shared queries to see if it's being used between modules or not. Because that IV stuff was started one way, edited, I thought it was finalized, it wasn't, then it got re-edited. Then we had an explosion of double building in the IV interventions from different areas of the software.
Yeah,
So
well, I
it
mean, you know,
became
we
a
didn't.
great big yarn ball of disaster at one
Yeah.
point that's still not
Well, we
untangled.
haven't done
But we'll,
anything with it, cause, you know, it's still an orderable intervention, so.
yeah.
me
But
and Molly haven't
that's a
touched
really
it.
good suggestion, though. Those are the
But
kind of
I
things we are testing out.
Yeah.
And if you find something
Since we're
on there that
getting to
needs
the point
addressed,
of
let us
getting
know.
Training and stuff. it'd be
Thanks
nice
for
to-
joining us for training.